She said I was a good man, just not the right one. Have you ever heard those words, not shouted, not angry, just soft, final, like the click of a door closing behind you? It's strange, isn't it? How someone can smile while walking away, how love can vanish without explanation. How everything you built, hours of listening, nights of holding on, days of believing, can mean nothing when compared to someone else's presence. And the worst part isn't the breakup. It's the silence after, the empty screen, the way your heart keeps checking a phone that never rings. You start asking questions you don't dare say out loud. Was I too weak? Was I boring? Did she ever even love me? And deeper, why does it feel like I was in a game I didn't know I was playing? If any of that feels familiar, this story is yours, not because you're bitter, but because you once loved deeply and still weren't enough. There's something I found, something that changed everything for me. And if you're still here, maybe it's something you need too. The longer I live, the more I am inclined to think that the shortness of women's hair is directly proportional to the length of their ideas. That wasn't just a cruel joke, that was a declaration, a wound disguised as wit, and it came from Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant minds in philosophy and one of the darkest. The first time Daniel read that line, he felt disgusted, angry. How could someone so intelligent be so bitter? But months later, after his own heart had been shattered, after the woman he thought was his future had simply walked away, he found himself reading that line again. And this time, he didn't flinch, he didn't argue, he just stared, because something in it hurt the way truth sometimes does. Daniel wasn't a hateful man, he wasn't angry at women, but something had broken inside him. And those words felt like a mirror no one wanted to hold. That's when he realized Schopenhauer didn't write that line because he hated women. He wrote it because he hated how love had made him feel weak, replaceable, unwanted. Daniel wasn't a philosopher. He was a software developer in New York City. But heartbreak doesn't care what you do, it just comes, like winter, slow, inevitable, and cold. He had been with her for 5 years. 5 years of growing together, of inside jokes, of making dinner on tired Thursdays, of sharing dreams on walks that didn't need a destination. And then one day, without warning, she said, "You're amazing, Daniel. You're just not the man I see my future with." She didn't cry, she didn't shout. She packed, closed the door, and vanished. At first, he thought it was a mistake, that she'd text the next day, that it was just fear or stress or confusion. But silence was her answer. Daniel stopped sleeping, stopped eating. His apartment became a time capsule, half hers, half empty. He didn't understand. He had done everything right. He was kind, loyal, present, supportive. So why wasn't he enough? That question haunted him at work, in the shower, while staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. He started replaying everything, every smile, every argument, every quiet moment. She seemed distant, looking for clues, looking for where he went wrong. But it wasn't just about her. It was about what her leaving awakened in him. A fear he never said out loud. A fear that maybe all of this wasn't about love, maybe it was about something else. And that's when Schopenhauer's words came back, sharper this time, less like an insult, more like a warning. Daniel wasn't alone in his pain. He began to realize there were millions of men like him, men who had given everything and still been left. Men who had followed every rule, only to lose to someone taller, richer, louder. It didn't make sense, unless love wasn't what he thought it was. And in that quiet, heavy question, he found something, something dark, something true, and something that would change the way he saw everything. But he didn't know it yet. All he knew was that he was tired, tired of hurting, tired of wondering, tired of chasing an answer that kept slipping through his hands. So one night he closed his laptop, put his phone away, and sat alone, just breathing. And in that breath he remembered the sentence, the one that had once made him furious, and this time he whispered it, not to agree, but to finally understand, not her, not Schopenhauer, but himself. Because sometimes the words we hate most are the ones that know exactly where we're bleeding. It was a Tuesday. She packed her things slowly, methodically, like she had rehearsed it. A sweater, a toothbrush. That photo they took in Chicago, she didn't take that one. She left it on the counter. Daniel stood in the doorway, silent, frozen, his voice stuck somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "A good man," she said, "just not the right one." That line, it didn't feel real at first. It echoed in his head like it belonged to someone else's story. He waited for her to laugh, to say she was joking. to turn around and kiss him like she always did after a fight. But she didn't. She closed the suitcase, zipped it shut, and with a soft, almost apologetic look she walked out. And that's when Daniel fell, not physically, but inside, like the floor of his chest had cracked open and he was just falling. That night he sat in the dark, not crying, not shouting, just blank. His hands still smelled like her perfume from folding her sweater, and every breath felt like a question. What did I do wrong? Was I too soft, too predictable? Did I not chase hard enough? Or was it that I chased it all? The next morning he called in sick, and the morning after, and then he just stopped calling. He stopped eating. Microwave dinners stacked up like unopened mail. He let dishes pile. He forgot to water her plant. It died within a week. But he didn't care, because something inside him had died too. He tried texting her. One message, then another, then nothing. The silence was loud. It screamed every answer he never got. And the world didn't stop for him. People kept going. The train still came at 7:43. Emails still arrived. Coffee still burned his tongue. Life didn't care that he had been broken. And neither, it seemed, did she. His friends said, "You'll move on. She wasn't the one. You deserve better." But none of that helped. Because what do those words mean when you already gave her the best of you? Every song hurt. Every couple on the street was a reminder. Every memory was a knife. He didn't hate her. He hated how she made him feel, disposable, like a jacket she outgrew, like a backup plan, like a maybe. And that's what cut the deepest. Because Daniel had believed in her, in them, in the idea that if you love someone enough, they'll stay. But love, he was beginning to realize, doesn't always reward the loyal. It doesn't always choose the kind. Sometimes it walks away from the man who would have died for it, and into the arms of someone who wouldn't blink. He saw her on Instagram smiling, with someone new, someone taller, someone confident, someone who looked like he never had to ask, "Am I enough?" That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and wondered if he had ever really been loved, or if he had just been convenient. He thought about everything he gave up. Late nights coding so they could afford vacations, saying no to job offers in other cities, changing his diet because she wanted to go vegan, therapy, even because she asked him to, and none of it had been enough. That's when the bitterness crept in, not loud, not angry, just quiet, heavy, like a fog rolling in over the life he thought he had built. He started whispering things to himself, not out of hate, but out of ache. Nice guys finish last. Love is a scam. She never loved me. He didn't believe them, not yet. But he needed something, anything, to explain why he felt so discarded. It wasn't the heartbreak that haunted him most. It was the shame of being left when you did everything right. The shame of thinking you were someone else forever and realizing you were just a chapter they outgrew. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever been there, then you know the weight of silence. You know the ache of not being chosen. You know what it's like to see them move on, while you're still picking up pieces of a future that no longer exists. And if you're nodding right now, if your chest feels tight as you listen, just know you're not alone in that pain. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You just loved fully. And in a world where everyone's chasing more, that kind of love can feel like a liability. But there's more to this story. There's a shift, a quiet realization that turns pain into power. And that moment, it's closer than you think. If love is a game, why didn't anyone tell me the rules? That question didn't leave Daniel's mind, not during work, not while brushing his teeth, not even while watching strangers kiss on park benches. There had to be a reason, a pattern. Something that explained why he was left behind, and the other guy, the louder one, the bolder one, got the smile he used to wake up to. He did what anyone in pain does these days. He searched. He typed in quiet words. Why do women leave good men? Why nice guys always finish last? Why do I feel like I was never enough? He didn't expect answers, just noise. But then he found a word, hypergamy. It didn't scream, it didn't glow. It just sat there waiting. He clicked read. Clicked again. Read more. Hypergamy, it said, is the natural tendency for women to be attracted to men of higher status. Social, financial, emotional, even physical. It wasn't about cruelty. It wasn't about being shallow. It was biology. A survival instinct passed down through generations. In ancient times, women survived by choosing the strongest mate, the protector, the provider, the man who could hunt and build and fight and lead. And even now, even with equality and careers and independence, that instinct still whispers. It whispers in boardrooms, on dating apps, in quiet glances across noisy rooms. Daniel leaned back in his chair. And for the first time something made sense. He wasn't broken, he wasn't unloved, he was just outcompeted. It hurt, God, it hurt. But at least now he had an answer. He started seeing patterns he never noticed. How confidence wasn't just attractive, it was magnetic. How presence mattered more than promises. How direction, purpose, ambition had a language of their own. He remembered moments now, like when she looked at him after a party and said, "Why don't you speak up more?" Or that time she asked, "Don't you want to lead something like anything?" At the time, he thought she was pushing him. Now he wondered if she was trying to feel something she couldn't name. And then the realization hit. She hadn't left because he was bad. She had left because, deep down, her instincts craved something else. Not someone better, just someone louder in the ways that triggered her biology. That didn't make her evil or manipulative, it made her human. But understanding that didn't ease the sting, it deepened it. Because now he wasn't just grieving love, he was grieving an illusion. The illusion that love was a fair exchange. That if you gave loyalty, you get loyalty. That if you showed up, she'd stay. He realized love wasn't a reward, it was a pull. And that pull didn't always favor the good guy. He began to ask bigger questions. What if love isn't about kindness? What if it's about power, not dominance, but gravity, that invisible force that draws others to you without you chasing them? And in that moment, Daniel didn't feel angry. He felt small, not because he was weak, but because he finally saw the game board, the rules, the pieces. The moves he never knew were being played. He thought back to every guy she said was just a friend. The ones with sharper edges, the ones who made decisions quickly, the ones who never waited for permission to speak. And suddenly the way she looked at them made sense. He wasn't mad at them, he wasn't even mad at her, he was mad at himself for playing a game without knowing he was in one. And in that madness, he began to shift. He didn't want to become someone else. He just wanted to understand, to stop living blind, to stop bleeding quietly in a world that rewarded volume. He looked in the mirror that night not for pity, not for answers, but to ask the question he had been avoiding. What does it take to become undeniable? And as that question echoed into the silence, he felt something, not hope, not rage, but focus. For the first time since she left, he wasn't asking why she chose someone else. He was asking, what would it look like if I chose myself? Daniel started watching more videos, reading more threads, joining more forums, each one talking about the same thing: status, dominance, game. They called it the red pill. A truth, they said, that most men weren't ready for. A truth that would make you powerful but cold. At first, it felt like relief. He wasn't alone. There were other men who had felt the same pain, other stories like his, different faces, same wound. They talked about hypergamy like it was a law of nature, like gravity, unforgiving, undeniable. Don't get emotional, one post read. Level up, get rich, get ripped, get out. Daniel screenshotted that line, made it his phone wallpaper, not because he believed it, but because he needed to. He needed something to hold on to, some story that didn't end with him being the victim, something that said, she left you because you were weak, so become strong. So he tried. He signed up for the gym, started lifting weights, posted his progress online, bought better clothes, practiced eye contact in the mirror. He learned the language frame, SMV, high value. It all made sense. But it also made him feel less human, because deep down none of this was about her or even about women. It was about pain, unspoken, unhealed, unseen. He started noticing things. The way men laughed online when others shared heartbreak. The way they mocked feelings. The way they turned every woman into a threat. And slowly Daniel began to feel it, the bitterness. It was subtle at first, a joke here, a comment there, but bitterness is sticky. Once it touches you, it clings, whispers, rewrites the way you see the world. He caught himself saying things he didn't used to. Women just want money. Nice guys are a joke. Feelings are for losers. He said them like armor, like mantras, but they never felt right. And one night he paused. He was scrolling through a comment thread. Hundreds of men bashing their exes, calling them liars, users, sluts. He didn't type anything, just stared. Because something inside him ached. This wasn't strength, this was pain in disguise. He saw it clearly now. These weren't warriors. They were wounded boys drowning in anger they didn't know how to process. And he was becoming one of them. Not because he hated women, but because it was easier than healing. Because when you're hurting, blame feels safer than introspection. But it's a trap. Blame keeps you spinning, locked in a loop. A victim dressed as a king. Daniel closed the tab, sat back, exhaled, and for the first time in months he didn't feel rage. He felt grief, not for her, for himself, for the version of him that had believed in love, in loyalty, in softness. That version had died quietly, buried under memes and muscle gains and cold advice. And in that moment he missed himself. The one who wrote her letters, the one who cared, the one who cried during movies, the one who believed he wasn't weak, he was real. And real had become rare, so Daniel made a choice, not loud, not dramatic, just a shift. He didn't delete the accounts, didn't make a post about leaving, he just stopped logging in. He started walking without headphones, started noticing birds, sunlight, his breath, and something strange happened. The world didn't feel like a threat anymore, it felt open, like maybe healing wasn't in becoming someone else, but in remembering who you were before the pain. If you've been in that place, that echo chamber of anger dressed as wisdom, you know how easy it is to get stuck there. So if you're listening and something inside you is tired of fighting, tired of blaming, tired of pretending, I get it. You're not weak, you're not lost, you're just hurt, and there's a way out. But it doesn't look like domination or revenge or games. It looks like silence, stillness, grief, and then growth. It started with an algorithm, one video, then another, then 100 more. Daniel's feed became a mirror of his wound. Every scroll, every click, every comment reinforced one message. You weren't enough because you were too soft. He began to believe it, not like a lightning bolt, but like slow rain soaking into his skin. He watched men with jawlines like knives and voices like commands. They didn't ask, they took. And the world admired them. Daniel wasn't like that. He asked, he waited, he listened. But none of that had kept her, none of that had made him the man she stayed for. So he changed, or tried to. He lifted heavier, ate stricter, took cold showers at dawn, read books with titles like No More Mr. Nice Guy. He spoke less, smiled less, laughed almost never. He wanted to be sharp, untouchable. A man no woman could walk away from. But the sharper he became, the less he recognized himself. At work, he stopped engaging in small talk. At the gym, he stopped helping the guy who asked for a spot. He became efficient, disciplined, hard, and everyone noticed. "You've changed," his coworker said. "Looks good on you," another added. But it didn't feel good, it felt hollow. Because underneath the muscle, beneath the posture and stoicism, there was still a boy, still waiting for someone to choose him. And no matter how much he tried to bury that boy, he kept surfacing in dreams, in music, in moments when the world was quiet. He wasn't angry anymore, just exhausted, exhausted from pretending, exhausted from chasing an image of manhood that felt more like a costume than a calling. He began to ask questions again, not about her, but about himself. Why did I believe I had to be someone else to be loved? Why did I trade softness for sharpness and call it strength? That's when he saw it clearly. He hadn't become strong, he had become numb, and numbness isn't healing, it's hiding. He realized most of the advice he followed wasn't about growth. It was about control. Control your emotions, control your image, control the game. But healing, real healing, requires surrender, requires softness. Requires looking at the part of you that's still bleeding and not flinching. He thought back to who he was before the pain. A man who loved with his whole heart, who showed up, who wasn't afraid to say, "I miss you." And he missed that man, so he did something radical. He stopped performing. He took a break from the gym, ate pizza on a Friday night without guilt, watched an old movie and let himself cry. And it didn't make him weak, it made him real. He started writing again. Not blogs, just notes to himself, thoughts, questions, truths. One of them said, "You don't have to earn love by being hard to leave. You earn it by being true to yourself." That line stuck, because Daniel didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be known. And that meant choosing wholeness over armor. If you've ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the man staring back, if you've ever traded your truth for a version of you that felt safe but fake, then you understand this ache. It's the ache of almost becoming everything they said would make you lovable, and realizing it still doesn't fill the silence. So what now? What happens when you've reached the edge of performance, when you've leveled up, and still feel lost? You stop climbing someone else's ladder. You start building your own ground, and on that ground you become, not for them, not for applause, but because peace is better than power, and softness. When chosen, not stolen, is the strongest thing a man can carry. It had been months. Daniel wasn't counting anymore, at least not out loud. But he still remembered the date, still knew how long it had been since she left. One Saturday, while cleaning out a drawer he hadn't touched since spring, he found a photo. It wasn't staged, no filters, just a moment, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand in her hair, both of them smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. And for a second he didn't feel anger or bitterness, he felt warmth, a memory, untouched by the ending. He sat on the edge of the bed holding that photo like it was glass. And suddenly it wasn't about her choosing someone else. It wasn't about who had more money, more presents, more status. It was about her smile. That damn smile, not because it was beautiful, but because in that moment it was his. And maybe that's what hurt most, not losing her body, but losing the place in her world where he once belonged, the place where he was seen, wanted, enough. It wasn't rejection that haunted him, it was intimacy, now unreachable. He didn't miss the relationship. He missed the feeling of being known, of being chosen in the quiet ways, the texts at lunch, the hand on his knee during traffic. The laugh that broke mid-sentence because she couldn't hold it in, little things, invisible to the world but loud to the heart. And the truth hit him not like a punch but like a whisper. He hadn't healed yet, because he hadn't let himself mourn not just the breakup, but the version of him that existed only when she was around. The man who danced in the kitchen, who said cheesy lines just to hear her groan, who believed love could be enough. That man felt distant now. Like someone he used to know, someone he wasn't sure he could become again. But as he held that photo, he realized something else. He didn't want her back, not really, not anymore. He wanted to feel again, to feel safe in someone's arms, to be seen without performing, to be loved, without having to earn it every day. He wanted real, not perfect, not strategic, just real. And for the first time since she left, that didn't feel impossible. It just felt far. He placed the photo back in the drawer, closed it gently, not to forget. But to honor it, that smile, it wasn't a lie, it was a moment. And moments can be true even if they don't last. As he stood up, something inside him shifted, not healed, not complete, but open. Because maybe healing isn't about erasing the past. Maybe it's about learning to walk with it, to carry the memories like old songs played softly, without crying. And maybe that smile, the one in the photo, wasn't just hers. Maybe it was his too, a version of him still capable of joy, still open to love, still alive beneath the armor. And that version, he wasn't gone. He was waiting, not behind her, but ahead. The mirror didn't lie. Daniel stood in front of it one morning, shirtless, eyes tired, shoulders slouched. He hadn't shaved in days. His skin was pale, his eyes dull. There was no heartbreak anymore, no fresh sting, just a quiet decay. He realized he wasn't broken, he was idle, alive but not living. He went to work, came home, scrolled, ate, slept, repeat. Even the gym, once a temple of his recovery, now felt like a chore. He pushed weight but not purpose. There were no new goals, no new thoughts, just survival. And in that stillness a question rose: is this it? Is this the man I've become, not because someone left, but because I stopped choosing myself? He looked around his apartment, blank walls, unwashed clothes, half-finished books, dreams paused mid-sentence. He remembered when he used to stay up writing, when he'd get excited about ideas, about building something, learning something. Now, he couldn't remember the last time something made him feel alive. That scared him more than the breakup ever did. Because this wasn't grief, this was surrender. He had survived the storm but never rebuilt. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So he asked himself, where do I begin? Not with revenge, not with chasing, but with basics, the body, the mind, the day. He made a list. It wasn't impressive, just real. Wake up at sunrise, drink water, move for 30 minutes, read 10 pages, write 1 paragraph, cook a meal, go outside, not for results, for rhythm. He didn't post about it, didn't announce it, he just started. And the first week it sucked. Waking early felt brutal, his muscles ached, his mind resisted. But something began to shift, not overnight, not even noticeably. But after 2 weeks he looked at his desk and saw a finished book. He saw a journal entry from a day he almost quit, but didn't. He noticed that he stood taller, breath deeper. He wasn't healed, but he was no longer sinking. And most importantly, he began to trust himself again. Because healing isn't a mood, it's a habit, a pattern, a series of small promises kept. It's doing the dishes even when you feel empty. It's saying no to the voice that says, "What's the point?" It's honoring your future even when the past still lingers. Daniel didn't become a different man. He became the man he was before he stopped showing up for himself. And in that return he found something sacred, peace, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. He didn't feel strong every day, but he felt present, and that presence was power. If you're in that place, where the pain is gone but nothing's replaced it, where you're functioning but not feeling, you're not broken, you're dormant. And all it takes to wake back up is one small move, just one, not to impress, not to prove, but to remind yourself you're still here, you still matter, and you're not done yet. He stopped posting progress photos, stopped tracking every pound lifted, stopped trying to impress people who weren't watching. Daniel had reached a quiet turning point, not the kind you announce, the kind you feel. One morning after a run through the park, he looked up at the sky, no music in his ears, just breath and birds and wind. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he needed to become someone. He just was. The man in the mirror wasn't perfect, but he was real. He still had scars, still had questions, still had moments of doubt, but he no longer lived for validation. He lived for alignment. There's a difference. Validation asks, do they see me? Alignment asks, do I see myself? Daniel began choosing differently, not louder, not flashier, just clearer. He unfollowed people who made him feel less, unsubscribed from channels that shouted fear, deleted apps that sold shame dressed as self-improvement. He no longer chased the image of a man. He built the substance of one. He started cooking real food, laughing more, sleeping better, spending weekends hiking alone, not because he was avoiding anyone, but because he enjoyed his own company. He reconnected with friends, not the ones who only talked about money and women, the ones who remembered who he was before the pain. One of them said, "You seem lighter." And he was, not because he let go of the past, but because he stopped dragging it. He forgave her, not in some dramatic ceremony. Just in a moment, sitting on his balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline, he whispered, "It's okay." And he forgave himself too, for loving blindly, for shrinking to fit, for holding on too long. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was release. He no longer needed closure, he had clarity. He no longer needed to be chosen, he had chosen himself. And that changed everything. Because when you start living from within, people notice. Not because you're trying, but because you radiate something rare: stillness, direction, self-respect. He started getting compliments not on his body but on his presence. "You seem grounded. You feel different." He was not louder but deeper, and in that depth he found something unexpected: attraction, not the desperate kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't chase, that doesn't ask, that simply is. He met new people not from a place of needing, but from fullness. He didn't try to impress. He just shared, listened, laughed, and women noticed, not because he played games, but because he wasn't playing anymore. He had become a man with his own gravity, not perfect, not finished, but undeniable. And the most beautiful part, he didn't do it for them, he did it for himself. That's the paradox. When you no longer need to be chosen, that's when you truly are. Because confidence is quiet, direction is subtle, and real power doesn't shout, it just shows up. The man who once stood in the dark begging to be seen was now the one who walked through life, unapologetic, unshaken, unfolding. It was a Wednesday, ordinary, quiet. Daniel had just finished making coffee, the morning light spilling across his kitchen table, when his phone buzzed. One notification, her name. He stared at the screen, not in shock, but in stillness. It had been 2 years since the suitcase, since the silence, since the sentence that once cut him open. The message read, "Hey, just wanted to say I've been thinking about you." No emojis, no context, just a string of words carrying weight. He didn't open it right away. He finished his coffee, fed the plants, stepped onto the balcony, and let the morning hold him. And then he smiled, not because she reached out, but because he didn't need her to. Once that message would have broken him, pulled him back, lit every desperate hope. But now it was just data, a sentence. And he was whole. He did open it eventually, read it slowly. Let the memories rise and fall like waves. He didn't feel anger or longing, he felt peace. She didn't know the man he'd become, the mornings he reclaimed, the self-worth he rebuilt from silence, the friendships he repaired, the laughter he rediscovered. She didn't see the habits, the books, the hikes, the stillness. She hadn't been there for the chapters that changed him. So what did her message mean? Nothing. And everything. It meant she remembered or missed something, or maybe she just wanted to know if the door was still open. But Daniel had closed that door long ago, not with spite, with grace. He didn't reply, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because the conversation was over, not between them, between who he was and who he is now. He didn't need closure. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need validation. He had chosen himself. And that choice echoed louder than any "I miss you" ever could. He looked at his phone one last time, locked the screen, and placed it face down. Then he grabbed his bag, put on his shoes, and walked outside. The world hadn't changed. But he had, not by force, not by fire, but by choice. And in that choice he was free. He no longer waited to be chosen. Daniel had become the man who chooses, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. He didn't chase love. He welcomed it. If it came, beautiful; if it didn't, still beautiful, because now his life was full, not loud, not flashy, but full. He woke up with purpose. He ended each day with peace. And somewhere along the way, he stopped needing anyone to tell him who he was. That was the real shift. It didn't come from lifting heavier or dressing better or speaking louder. It came from presence, from showing up first for himself, from listening, from building, from becoming. Not to prove a point, not to get her back, but because peace tastes better than revenge. That peace came from doing the work, from sitting with the pain instead of running from it, from honoring his grief, from forgiving himself for not knowing sooner. Daniel didn't forget the heartbreak. He just stopped letting it write his story. He started writing his own, with discipline, with softness, with real strength, the kind that doesn't collapse when things fall apart. He built a life worth living. Not a highlight reel, not a strategy. A life. He traveled more, smiled more, looked people in the eye again. He held doors, tipped well, made eye contact with strangers. He became magnetic, not because of what he wanted, but because of who he was becoming. And if love returned, it would be met by a man who was already whole, who didn't need fixing, who didn't need rescuing, a man with scars, but not shame. A man who knew that heartbreak doesn't make you weak, it wakes you up. So what about you? What if your pain wasn't the end, but the invitation? What if the silence in your chest isn't empty, but waiting to be filled with your own voice? What if you're not behind, you're just at the beginning? You don't need to beg, you don't need to chase, you don't need to shrink. Grow, lead, rise, because once you know who you are, no rejection, no loss, no goodbye can make you feel like you're not enough. You were never broken. You just hadn't come home to yourself yet. Now you have, and you are already enough.